Shalom. אני כל כך שמחה להיות פה.
And you can speak English.
כן, okay, and I will. So I don't want to get gosh, you speak Hebrew now. And thank you so much. תודה רבה על ההזמנה, באמת. So just who I am. I work at NYU. I'm on the faculty in the Department of Nutrition, Food Studies, and Public Health. And I teach both in undergraduate courses in nutrition and graduate courses in nutrition. I direct the dietetic internship at NYU, the master's program, and I do a study abroad to Italy every year, where we actually study food, history, politics, but we use food as the vehicle to really understand Italy and the food culture. And I also work as a consultant for Nickelodeon. So the reason I'm sharing all of this with you is because I really see nutrition from so many different angles. I also privately see patients for weight loss. I've worked in sports nutrition, and I've worked with people that have eating disorders. So I've done so many different things, and I've been around long enough now to know that there are a lot of positive changes happening. And the question that Hagi posed to me was, is Israel going to be the next America? So I spent a few days thinking about it, and I was looking up statistics of Israel, and I thought, no, they don't want me to come from America to talk about Israel. I should come here and share with you what's going on in America, and hopefully at the end, you will decide whether or not Israel is turning into America in terms of our health, our current health. So what I'd like to do is just share with you where we are in the States and kind of give you a little background. And of course, I could spend so much time talking to you about these issues. So I'm really focusing on what I think are most important and most critical now. So the first thing is, and I just don't want to only focus on obesity, but it really is so important. And if you look at this map, maybe you've seen it before, you could see trends of obesity. And here it is in 1985, and where there was white, the white signifies very little obesity. Could everyone see? I don't know if other people's ways. So look at the changes that happened in 1990. Now we're going into 1995. And there's still some blue, good, right? And now we're going into 2000. And you can see now this ends at 2010. And there's no blue left. And there's dark orange. And dark orange is showing that these are high rates of obesity. And you could see, unfortunately, that it is in the South, which is more the poorer regions of the states. And that's unfortunately holds true, that we see levels of obesity, food insecurity, and lack of nutrition education, lack of healthy foods, unfortunately in the lower income areas and countries, and where people need the most education and need the most access to healthy foods, they don't exist. And I think it holds true here to a certain degree as well. So this is not looking good. And if you look at this, this is what is most critical to everyone, to American, Israelis, is these are diseases we used to die of, and that's in the 1900s. And as you can see, the diseases that were caused by bacteria and illnesses related to germs. And if you look now in 2010, I don't think it's any different in Israel, the major diseases we're dying from are heart disease and cancer, and diseases related to lifestyle. And, you know, this is what I always tell my students and I share with them, that we kind of know the answer. We know the answer that the diseases that we're dying from are how we now live. Our bodies weren't made for the way we live our lifestyles in the 21st century, and nothing can change that. Nothing's going to change the fact that we need to eat certain foods, foods from nature, not processed foods, not fake foods. We need to move. Movement, exercise, physical activity is not a luxury. It's not something if I have time I'll do it. This is how our bodies were designed. And when we live in a world where we don't eat food any longer, we eat food products, when we don't move anymore, the results are these diseases. This is what happens. So we kind of know the answer, and this is what's so sad, because we know we can make changes, and unfortunately, many of us don't. So why is obesity so unhealthy? Well, you know, we are wired to store energy because of our body's genes and our history of usually being in a state of famine when we didn't have enough energy. So this is very normal to humans. The way we live today is something unique. The fact that we have overconsumption, so many extra calories, and we don't move, we're very sedentary. And what happens is we start to accumulate all this fat. And the fat, as you can see, especially if there's too much excessive adipose tissue, leads to so many different diseases. And we now know something we didn't know many years ago. When I studied nutrition, we didn't know that. And that we know that adipose tissue doesn't sit there inert, especially the adipose tissue that's in our abdomen. And what it does is it is causing inflammation, and it starts to cause diseases like diabetes, heart disease, etc. So you can see in this chart that there is a direct correlation to our excessive weight in certain diseases. And as you become more and more obese, there's a correlation between your level of obesity and your risk of developing certain diseases. So I didn't know who would be in this audience, so I just want to start with some basics so we're all on the same level. I don't know if you've heard of BMI. BMI is a really good tool we use to measure our weight against our height. It's a mathematical formula, but it's good. And it's a tool, and it has its limitations, but it is a good tool. And you can see that somebody shouldn't be too thin, because little fat is very important, especially for women. You don't menstruate, you're not fertile if you don't have enough body fat. So we don't want anyone at one extreme. And the best range to be is usually around this range. And as our BMI increases, it becomes more and more dangerous. Now, this is not an aesthetic thing. It has nothing to do with your physical appearance. It has to do with the fact that the more excess adipose tissue you have, the greater the risk of certain diseases. And then when you get to this class, in the United States, when you have a BMI of 40, the health insurance companies will pay for you to have surgery, gastro surgery, for weight loss, because the risk of dying or getting some disease that you will die is greater. So this is how serious it is. So we have different classifications of obesity. And here, for you to have a graphic image. And this is what's really good in healthcare, because I could say to somebody that this person has a BMI of 36, and I know pretty much what that person looks like. So it's really good so you have an idea of what one looks like according to their BMI. Now, if someone's very, very athletic, their BMI could be very high because it's muscle mass. So, so that's something you have to be aware of. But most important is where we store our fat. And the most dangerous place to store fat is here in the stomach. And that we know now. And we didn't know this many years ago, but we know central obesity is the type of fat that's linked to coronary disease, to strokes, to diabetes, and all these other diseases. And we store fat in different places, and we store fat right underneath our skin. But the most dangerous fat is the fat that is in our organs, infiltrates our organs. And you can see when you buy meat, the meat that's most juicy is the meat that has the marbling. And that's what starts to happen to us as we get fatter and fatter, and as we become more sedentary. So when you become more active, that's where you hopefully will start to lose some of your fat, because that definitely is the most dangerous place to store fat. And there are people who may not look that heavy, but they're very, very sedentary. So what happens, we call them skinny fat, is that they start to have fat that isn't so much inside there, right underneath their muscle, but it's more visceral, and it becomes, very, very serious as well. So there's no doubt that it's critical to include physical activity, because we really want to prevent this. So when I know somebody's BMI, I also want to know their waist side. That's very important to know. And over here you can see there's two types of bodies. And for women, until we postmenopausal, many of us have what is known as a pear-shaped body. So we keep a lot of our fat down here, and that is actually healthier. But as women become postmenopausal because of hormonal changes and other changes, many of us, to start that belly fat. And again, that's why the risk of a woman, when she's postmenopausal, for heart disease is just as great as it is for men. The number one killer for women is cardiovascular disease, not breast cancer, as many people think. And that's also because we start to store that belly fat. So that's So now, you know, Machon Weitzman, I need to have one very fancy science diagram, so I threw one in, just, you know, to pay respect to this institute. But the real reason is that when you start to gain weight, especially the belly fat, you start to develop other syndromes. And if you have elevated triglycerides, and you have elevated blood pressure, the belly fat, you have something known as metabolic syndrome. It's not a disease, but it's what could cause diabetes, heart disease, fatigue, all these symptoms, and it could really, really take away from the quality of one's life. Now, why is this so important to hear? Because everything I just described now is happening in children in the States. Because children are becoming so heavy, they are developing diseases like gallbladder disease, sleep apnea, cardiovascular disease, stroke, as young as 10, 11, 12, because they're sitting at home, they're not active, they're eating so many calories, they're not eating food, they're eating all this processed stuff. And so we're seeing, as a result, a generation where kids who are so young are developing what we thought were adult diseases. But something very important, it is not a natural part of the life cycle that when you get older, oh, you develop diabetes or you get heart disease. The drug companies in America want you to believe that. I don't know if you have it here in the States, but in America, the drug companies are allowed to advertise on TV. And their goal is to make everyone think that you should take statins, and you should be taking things to lower your blood pressure, and you should be taking things because you have indigestion and gastric reflux. It's not true. A natural part of the aging process doesn't mean you get strokes and you get cardiovascular disease and you get diabetes. It happens because they're chronic diseases that develop over a very long period of time. And what happens is, it's your lifestyle. So something we'll explore today, how important it is starting in utero to have a healthy environment for the growing fetus. And this is some really interesting research that I'll explore with you. So let's look at the comparison here of statistics of weight. If you look at overweight, you guys are doing great. So, because if you look at Israel in terms of being obese, rather. Sorry, let's start with obese. Israel is over here. The percentage of Israelis that are obese, so that's much more than being overweight. That's excessive adipose tissue, is only around 14%, and we. Proud to be #1, USA, at 34%. Where it differs, is where it becomes, that's obesity, sorry. Where it differs is in overweight, and that's where you're catching up, unfortunately. So you're not there yet. And this is such a critical time, because we're going to be talking about a food movement, and I think it is such an important time to think about this in Israel, because you are not yet at the state where the United States is. So if you look here in terms of overweight, though, you're up there. You're at 45%, and we're at 68%. That means 68% of Americans are overweight. That's unbelievable. Think of it. And if it doesn't stop, we'll have 100%. And you can't survive as a nation with 100% overweight, because it leads to disabilities, diseases, and something that may not be, a parallel here, but what about the military? You can't have unfit people going into the military, and that may be the only thing that will get certain people in the United States to listen, to change the food environment. So let's look at our kids. So if you look at the children, let's see where Israel is. I didn't put those arrows. So Israel, your children, you have boys and girls, like 20% of children here. So we're seeing that number rise. And in the United States, again, we pass you, and we're at the 30%. Greece and Mexico are very high, especially Mexico. It's huge in Mexico. Huge obesity in Mexico. Greece, yeah. Mediterranean diet, right? Well, what happens there? Too much olive oil. Too much baklava. So these statistics are very important because, again, we're talking about disease, and we're talking more important about children. And this is also why I think, because undoubtedly a characteristic of Israel is the importance of children and the generation. And I think that's very, very important here. And this may be the hook to get people to say we've got to make a difference in the environment, in the food environment, not for our sake, for our children's sake.
But that was 4 years ago. What about the situation
I
today?
don't think it's that different. I couldn't find newer ones with the comparison, so I don't think in 4 years it's been that different. Unfortunately, though, when you go to poor areas in Israel, it may be higher, and that's the same in the States. So if we go down south, you're going to see that these are the people that are eating more of the processed foods, that don't have as much physical activity, etc. And here worldwide this is becoming a problem. I thought we should all pay attention to this, and that's because as a global world, we're in an environment where there's just overconsumption of food. Food is everywhere, and we become more lazy as people, and you're seeing increases in obesity. Now, just something important is that don't confuse being overweight with at least they're nourished, because that's the paradox of obesity, is that you could be obese and be malnourished. So there are children who are very overweight. If you go to poorer parts of the States, you don't have to go to poorer parts of the States. In Manhattan, you can go to different regions in Manhattan, and you see obese children. These children can be very malnourished because what they're eating usually is junk that doesn't have nutrition. So they're very, very fat, but they don't have healthy diets, and it's the same here. So we need to pay attention to the fact that weight doesn't mean that you're healthy, and vice versa, by the way. Just because your child is thin doesn't mean I don't have to worry that kids, I know that attitude, they can eat what they want. That's not true. It is critical that we start at a very young age, and I'll show you some videos where you start in utero, that we shouldn't be feeding kids at any age this junk. All the soda, all the Bamba, the Beasley, all this all the time, the white bread, the chocolate, all that stuff. Once in a while, but it's just for many reasons, and now there's so much research on the bioderm of your GI tract, that we should teach our kids how to eat healthy. There's no such thing as a child's diet and children's menu. That was something the food industry did a great job convincing us, that kids have a separate menu. And they convince kids that kids don't eat like adults. Kids here, what is schnitzel, chips, cola here. It's not true. And what happens is kids start to develop a taste for sweet beverages, for only eating fried foods, for very salty foods. So we need to rethink how we educate young kids. It's very hard to change your food habits. It really is. So if you look at this here in the States, you could see how between boys and girls, how it's just as young as 2 years old. I mean, it's how high the obesity is, 2 years old. So.
But doesn't it, I mean, as a parent, I mean, my dilemma is I don't want to cause the counter response. If I'm being
Exactly.
strict, no wet flour, no sweet.
But you don't have to be black and white. There is gray. But first of all, what's important, I think I'll get to it. So let's wait. But write that question down, because if I don't, I want to answer it. Because I think you ask a very important question. It shouldn't be so extreme that you're the kid is the only kid that doesn't eat this. But the other extreme is that it doesn't mean you have to have Coca-Cola in your house. A lot of people feel that kids can eat because they're kids. It's okay. They're cute. They're chubby. It's not true, and certainly not true for your teeth. Not to mention that. Okay, so how did we get there? This is really how we got there. This is how our bodies were designed to consume food and energy. This is where you have vitamins, minerals, and more importantly, something known as phytonutrients. It's nutrients that the plant makes. The plant makes its nutrients, and that's how the plant survives in nature. From all the ultraviolet radiation, from the changes in weather, and all these other conditions. And every year you have plants, because they're protected by because they make phytonutrients. When we consume plants, whether it be grains, whether it would be fruits and vegetables, we're not only getting the vitamins and the minerals, we're getting the phytonutrients. And this probably helps in terms of detoxifying our bodies, in terms of cancer prevention, heart disease, and many other diseases. So to me, when people talk about health food and they go to all these specialty stores and they buy all this stuff, and I don't know what it means, and they spend a lot of money, this is the health food store. This is this is where you go. If you want to go to a health food store, the problem is it doesn't have any fancy marketing. The poor sweet potato looks so ugly. The batata, whatever you think you call it. What does it look attractive? You go down certain aisles and all these food labels and all the million nutrients it contains. Nothing beats a real food. And the other thing is, you can't compare the way nature packages a food. There's a difference between extracting a nutrient from a food and taking it as a pill and eating the food. And so much research has been done on this because pharmaceutical companies like the idea of if wine is good, what's good in wine? Let's make a pill, resveratrol. Let people take it and they'll have better blood values. They did a big study in Finland with beta carotene, and what they see over and over again, quite often, the opposite happens. Why? Because we don't know what's in the food, how the nutrients interact with each other. We don't know. And that's why we should be eating food that comes from nature, that's as least processed as possible, that the nutrients stay intact. That's how our bodies were designed to eat. And when you go astray and you start to eat all the processed food, you go down what we call the cage in the supermarket and all the things that come in packages, and you eat all the sweetened beverages and all those instant mixes and all the other stuff, is your body doesn't know what to do because your body wasn't equipped to deal with this. So what does it do? It develops these diseases that we're dying of. So we know the answer. I don't think people would dispute this, but this is how we eat now. These aren't foods. These are food products that are made not from a plant in nature, but from some chemical plant. And these are lacking nutrients, but their labels could exaggerate and show all the wonderful things they have. And that's unfortunately what a lot of people do. And I tell people when they shop and they're looking at their cart, buy as few foods with labels as possible. Make sure your cart is full of colors that are fruits and vegetables, because the more colorful your fruit and vegetables, the more nutrients they contain. The colors are actually the phytonutrients that I described to you. So stop buying so many foods in packages, and don't buy packages where you can't understand the ingredients. I don't know if you know Michael Pollan, but he's a famous food writer, and he says with the person that Hagit alluded to before, Marion Nessel, don't buy processed or packaged foods with more than 5 ingredients. And if you can't understand it, don't buy it. If you don't know what it means, don't buy it. Who knows what you're eating? And sometimes what you're eating may sound okay because it comes from nature. It doesn't mean anything. You know, would you eat any mushroom that's from nature? No, because a lot of them are poisonous. So just because something's natural doesn't mean anything. The way sometimes natural foods are processed, like stevia. Now it's the new sweetener, it comes from a leaf. Well, you know, how they process it becomes sometimes dangerous. So this is how we ended up. And then if you look at different countries all over the world, look at Egypt. I mean, they have a weight problem, but they are eating a lot of still a lot of vegetables. I couldn't find Israel. I hope you don't mind. Egypt was the closest to you guys.
No worries.
It's a project of Life magazine, isn't
Can.
it? Israel was not.
We are not
Yeah,
offended.
all right. Gamze. So if you look here, you can see it's vegetables. And then I'm a little ashamed of the next one, but this is the typical American diet. And it is. And it you know, people came to the America, the land of abundance, the convenience, and this is what we ended up, you know, people work, the pizza, the soda, the junk, the snack foods, and this is what we have.
Because
the problems we
it's
have.
cheaper. It's cheaper than
Here
the
in
good
the States
food.
it is, but not well,
States.
I don't know if it's cheaper. I take issue with that because I think a lot of times people say it's cheaper to eat this way. There's no doubt that you can eat very, very healthy on a strict budget. Here in the States, not here, in the States, a lot of junk food is cheaper, but you still can eat very healthy by eating a healthy diet. So if you look, these were some of the guidelines of the dietary guidelines in 2010, but these were the goals, not of the government, that these are the foods we should be eating more of. And you can see we're not doing very well. I don't care about dairy, and I don't care about the nutrients. I'm looking more at the whole grains, vegetables, fruits. We're not doing well at all, right? 15%. And these are the foods we should really limit. And look how well we're doing. We're over 180% with solid fats and added sugar. Added sugars. And the thing I'm going to focus on today is added sugars. So we're nowhere
Why
where we
is
should be.
dairy at the top? Because it's not.
Well, because it's political. I'm going to go into that in a minute.
Yep.
We're going to get into politics. You can't talk about the American health and not talk about politics, because food and health is political, and that's why the two should never mix. So the question I pose is, how did we get there? So I said this when we opened up, and this is the truth. Our genes haven't changed. So for those that think, well, the reason we're getting fatter, our genes are changing, no, our genes haven't changed. So let's see what changed. Our metabolism has changed. You can change your metabolism. There was an amazing paper, amazing study where they put healthy young men who were physically active, and they were in great shape, and they put them over a period of like a month on a high-calorie diet, and they didn't exercise. After 3 days of just eating 1,500 extra calories, they started to develop elevated insulin levels, hyperglycemia. Not yet, but in other words, you could actually change your metabolism by overeating, and then by being less active, you could start to increase your insulin levels. And it's transitory, so once they started to eat healthier, it went down. But you keep doing it, you keep doing that. And I don't want to get into all the details of what happens, but to say that many people do change their metabolism, it becomes easier to eat, to gain weight. It also becomes easier to gain weight when you become fatter and lose muscle mass, because the more muscle you have, the more calories you can eat just to sustain muscle. So two people sitting here weighing the same amount, one person who has more muscle will be using more calories because muscle requires more energy. But as we get fatter and fatter and fatter, we need less calories. But what we unfortunately, most of us don't start to change the way we eat, and that's how we end up gaining weight. And then what else has changed? This has changed, our food environment. And what's also changed is our activity level. You know, everything. We sit, we don't move, we don't get up even to do little tasks. And that's just not the way our body's meant to be. Our body must be exercised. And what happens is, what I like to quote Kelly Brownell, who's a psychologist who used to work at Yale University, he calls it a toxic environment we live in. We live in an environment where it's amazing if you're not overweight. We live in an environment where food is everywhere. And what happens is, we're going to get into all of these issues in a moment, is we eat cheap calories, we eat highly processed foods, we have very, very large portions now, so we overeat. We eat foods that don't make us feel full. You could drink 800 calories of Coca-Cola, you're not going to feel full. That doesn't answer satiety. Plant foods, vegetables, fruits do. And then we don't move. We take the elevator, we don't walk, we take, everything is made to be easy for us. So we get fatter, and then we don't feel comfortable, don't feel like doing anything because it's uncomfortable, our back hurts, whatever. And then it causes it causes stress. And then we don't sleep well, and they develop sleep apnea. We don't have energy, so what do? You want to pick me up. You have a cup of coffee. Who doesn't have a cup of coffee with a cookie? And then what happens? We start with taking, alcohol, tobacco, and it's this whole cycle. So where do we break this cycle? So what's happening to kids today? It's the same thing. And as you can see in this comic, it's a beautiful day. I really want to go outside and play. So something that also we must look at, and this is a very important slide, which is that we are not eating at home as much. I know when I grew up, I know for sure in Israel it was this way. It was such a treat to eat out. I mean, once a month you went out to eat, and I know, right? Now the opposite is the norm, where I remember I once went to a school in Brooklyn, and I was working with these young kids, and it was low income, and I asked the kids how often do they eat a home-cooked meal, and they raised their hand. I said, so describe it to me. And they said it's when their mom takes from the freezer something and puts it in the microwave, and they do that twice a week, and that's home-cooked. And that's when it hit me. Isn't that sad? So we're seeing that the amount of meals that are away from home is increasing, and the amount of meals that we eat outside of home is increasing. And that has very negative consequences. It's very hard to eat out and eat healthy most of the time. We tend to overeat when we eat out. Most people who cook give you very big portions, or else they add too much salt or too much oil. And what's most important to me, something that is so important to me, is the importance of the family meal. It's so important to have memories of food, to understand food, and to sit down and have a meal, and to sit and eat a meal. Because in the States, people walk and eat. People walk down the street and have their lunch. And that, to me, is really bad. In the States, some kids don't know how to use utensils. Do you know that? Because they eat only fast food. So they never knew what to do with a fork or knife. I know it sounds crazy here because you're not there yet. We're going to talk about some of the most wonderful things of Israel, and you guys don't see that yet. They don't know what to do when they see a fork or knife because everything is fast food, is handheld. So this is what's happening. And as you can see, that fast food is, and what's fast food? I mean, most of it is not healthy. And the portions are huge. And where is my IV okay. And kids no longer know where food comes from. They're not connected to food. They think food is junk. This is to them is food. They don't have memories. And you know, many people say because women work now, it's very difficult. And I challenge that. I say if it's a priority, if it's something important to you, you'll do it. And I did it, and my kids are in this audience, and they'll prove it. So I'm not just saying it. But it was very important to me, and I work long hours, I commute, I sometimes don't get home till 7 o'clock. It takes me over an hour. The reason I'm giving is not for you to feel sorry for me. It's because what was more important to me was how my children could grow up with food memories, with aromas of food, to know where food comes from. So what did I do? I batch cook sometimes, my husband and I, on Sunday. I cook for a few days. And yeah, I had those emergency meals, and meals I could make in 10 minutes, but it was a priority to me. I never ever gave them, rarely microwave foods or anything, never went to McDonald's, because it's something that was important to me. And I think when things are a priority, when people understand why it's important, then they are more motivated to do it, I believe. So I just want to share with you a video that demonstrates how kids don't relate to food any longer.
And now, a brand new sneak peek from Jamie Oliver's Food Revolution.
Hello. Hello. Hello, miss. There's loads to fix. The younger kids are really struggling, so I wanted to see if the kids even knew what fresh food looks like. Are you ready for my class?
We are ready. Welcome.
Thank you very much for letting me. How old are you guys? 6. Wow. I love working with kids. Elementary school is where it's at. You know, this is where you mould kids. And we're going to do a little test. Right. Potato? So you think these are potatoes? Not potatoes, though. Do you know what this is? No? Who knows what tomato ketchup is? Yeah, that's what it's made out of.
Oh, tomato ketchup? I know that.
Was shocking. Do you know what that is? Do you know what that is?
Broccoli.
What about this? A good old friend. Do you know what this is, honey?
Celery.
No. What do you think it is, darling?
Onion.
Onion, no. Immediately you get a really clear sense of, do the kids know anything about where food comes from? Who knows what that is?
A pear.
A pear, no.
A turd.
No? Okay, I'm going to give you the first word. Egg.
Egg. Egg salad.
Jamie Oliver's Food Revolution. Series premiere Friday, March 20th.
Unbelievable.
No. It's no, but it could be in New York. He did it. So kids don't. So that's one thing, right? The lack of connection. And this is some pictures that maybe for you still, I think they don't fit into Israel yet, but they seem so comfortable for me to see. People eating their meal on the subway. People just eating in the car. In fact, now cars actually are designed to have bigger cup holders. Do you know that? The American cars, so you can get that 72-ounce beverage. and people just eat in their cars. They take their kids to soccer, stop through a drive-in. You don't have to move. You just go to the drive-in, stuff your kids with all these calories. People walk down the street in New York and eat. This, in my opinion, is not yet here. Here, and the only other country I know well is Italy, and that yet in Italy doesn't
Do you
exist.
speak Italian? Lisa?
No.
You know, there is in Italy we say a tavola non si invecchia. You know
Right.
what is it? Around the table you don't get older. So it's quality
So
time.
you're my Italian.
Yeah.
I didn't know it. You didn't tell me because I have
Some surprises.
Yeah, I looked it. I was going to say, are you the Italian? Good, because there's some things here, and I'll refer to Italy. So here's all the drive-through, and here is the typical American family, just sitting in front of the TV, which leads to mindless eating, just consuming more and more calories. And again, so much happens around the table. A lot of research was done to show that kids who eat with their family do better in school, consume more vitamins and minerals, have better socially, that they learn manners. So much is taught around that table, and this is the typical American diet. People just sitting and just eating and not just consuming tons of calories. In the States, something we have, which again, you could correct me if I'm wrong, this really doesn't exist in Italy either too much, certainly, no, I don't think in Israel too, but we have food deserts. And what this map shows, it shows this is New York City, by the way. This is not, you know, like Louisiana or something. This is New York City, and this is in dark brown is where there's no access to fresh fruit and vegetables. It's called food deserts. And this is the Bronx. This is parts of Queens. This is Brooklyn, Queens, and this is in Staten Island. So it's high, moderate, or less. And that means that they can't get low-fat milk. They can't get fresh fruit or vegetables. This is what their neighborhoods look like. And this is America, the richest country in the world. And then you wonder why these people are developing all these diseases and why our healthcare costs are so high. Look at this. So people live in what we call a food desert. And that, I think, still doesn't exist in Israel today, nor Italy. Those are the two, you know, things about Israel and Italy, is that you don't see this. This is New York City. This is what's so shocking. So why? What else happened? We're sitting. I just went to a conference, and amazing changes are happening in terms of smoking in the States. There's no doubt smoking has gone down. It's even becoming not cool to smoke. But they said now that sitting is going to become the new smoking. The thing we'll die from. It's very dangerous to sit all day, and this is how we're living our lives. Many of us, especially those that have work jobs. I think this was a bad picture, the family right for breakfast sitting there. So ignore that picture.
It's only 15 minutes, it's nothing.
Yeah, but to sit. So this is the typical person, is just in their car, sitting. That means that they sat for 15.5 hours of a 24-hour day. Movement is important. In fact, some research is even standing, even just moving every 15 minutes. That's why they have all those Fitbit watches now, to remind you to get up and move, because we know that this is so dangerous, sitting all day. And then if you look, what's happening is people, I see this. I'm so glad you laughed. That's good. It's a sign that it's not here yet. I mean, like in gyms, my gym, people take the elevator. Why are you taking the elevator to the gym? If you have such a disability, you shouldn't be at the gym doing all these legs things with your legs.
House, the dog is in the car and
Walking the dog. And I just want to show you that if you just become more active in your everyday life, look at the difference. Somebody who just takes the elevator. So let's not say you do any form of physical activity. Just in moving more, and just making a decision that you're going to become more active. So if we compare the calories burnt, it's not just for calories. Exercise is never about calories. I just want to make that clear. That would be the last reason I ever tell anyone to exercise. Just by moving more, this person burned 3,815 calories a day, a week, sorry. And the person that just sat only burned 437. Now the calories was the only thing I could show you that was something we can measure. But you can't measure the uptake of sugar from the muscles and all these other things. So we got to get people to move more. We got to make that part of the movement is not just to eat healthier for the environment, but to move more. So I have some pictures of some stores, and I try to find the analogy I put in as well for you guys. So everywhere you go now, there's food being sold. And the biggest shocker was when I went to, you call it Office Depot, we call it Staples. You know, so imagine, I walk into Staples, which sells paper and all these things. All of a sudden I see huge candy and cookies, and I'm thinking, why? It seems so out of context. The minute you walk in there, that's what they sell. In case you want to buy candy and cookies for the office. And this is everywhere you go, there's an opportunity to buy food. A very famous department store in New York, Macy's, every floor they sell food now. It never was that way. You go to a department store to buy clothes. There, every floor, you could buy food. What else has happened in the States? Portion sizes have gone so hot big. They're so huge that unfortunately kids don't even have a reference of what a normal portion is, and that's the biggest problem because they're so huge, and it's such a deal. For 25 cents more you get twice the amount of French fries or soda or popcorn. So this is what French fries used to look like, and this is what a portion size is now. And then we take a bagel. A bagel used to look like this, and now bagels are huge. And all this white flour. So this is just a plain bagel. So this is me. This is a baked potato. I've never seen such a baked potato. We were out to dinner, and we looked at this woman's plate, and I was so sure it was a huge piece of bread. It's a baked potato that is like twice the size. Look how long my fingers are. And that was, so even our vegetables are becoming bigger because of the way they're being of agriculture. And then they become expensive because they're so huge. I can't find small apples anymore. Our biggest problem is with beverages. So we can see here that as you have more, the beverage sizes are so big and there's more added sugar. And this is like 64 ounces. Look how much sugar. 217 grams of sugar. I realize it's getting late. I'm going to have to. So why is this so important? Because portion sizes may be a good deal. However, there's some amazing research about giving portion sizes, this unlimited. And the thing is, it's by Brian Wensack, and it is that how package size, serving size, and the size of our plate influence how much we eat. And he's done amazing research. And that larger packages, larger servings, larger plates, you're going to eat more. You will, because satiety up until a certain age, when children are very young, they're able to control their own hunger and satiety. And then they lose it once they're socialized after about like 4 or 5. And then it becomes all these external cues which cause them to overeat. And then the increase in perceived portion sizes will increase the amount you eat. And they've done amazing research where they keep refilling soup bowls and the person doesn't know. And they just keep eating. And they don't know that underneath it's getting refilled. And they just keep eating and eating. They didn't even realize they're full. When the person next to them, they didn't refill it. So we eat with what's available. And we have overabundance of food and calories. And people, as we get older, will determine how much to eat based on the vision. So if you have a buffet and you let people keep giving them more and more, they're going to keep eating it. And it adds up. And